Greetings, and you have entered into another truth session with the owner and operator of this truth session, the one, the host with the most. I am Cassandra. I would like to invite you to look at a trauma from the social and medical perspective, and this is
C.A. Colley, your nurse practitioner, and I am delighted to be here with you today for another truth session. And Cassandra, she's going to talk about the social aspects of trauma and the ACE study that really let us know what we're experiencing with trauma. And then from a medical perspective, I'm going to tell you how it translates into your physiology, into your illnesses. And we're going to end with some directives on healing. And so that's what we're going to do here today. And we're happy to have you here with us on this Saturday.
great. I would like to go on and get started with discussing ACE and just what ACE is. Yes, sir.
Let your people populate.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Just let them.
Okay.
So while you populate, we just want to continue to welcome you to the Truth Session. And we've got the Apostle, J.F. Clay, the one directing us today, but we are the women in the captain's seat today. So we hope you enjoy having a little bit of different energy, some feminine energy today. And we're addressing trauma from a social and medical perspective, with Cassandra being your social worker today, and myself, C.A. Colley. I am your nurse practitioner. And we're just waiting for you to come on in. And your nurse practitioner here with you today. Greetings, Wanda. It's nice to see you.
So glad to see you. So happy to be you. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, come on, family. Come on in. Come on, family. Let's do it again. Come on, family. Come on in. Come on, family. Let's do it again. Do it again and again and again.
Greetings, Lester. Nice to see you.
Scott Adams.
Khalil P, so good to see you.
Yes, it's that time.
We have Brother JP
Yes,
and Master Teacher.
that's right. On the keyboard and the congos and the bongos. All right. Once again, greetings. I am Cassandra, and welcome to another Truth Session. Well, today we will discuss trauma from the social and medical perspective. I'm going to start off by speaking on trauma as it relates to the social perspective. We're going to start today by briefly talking a little about ACE. Apostle actually addressed ACE some time ago, initially when he started the session on trauma. We actually started to review some information by Dr. Burke Harris. She's one of the leading people that addresses childhood adversities. So Master Teacher will actually place the definition for ACE on the timeline for you. And while he's doing that, I'm going to go on and read what the definition is. It says, what is ACE? ACE is a term for adverse childhood experiences. This refers to a range of events that a child can experience, which leads to stress and can result in trauma and chronic stress responses. Multiple chronic and persistent stress can impact a child's developing brain and has been linked in numerous studies to a variety of high-risk behaviors, chronic diseases, and negative outcomes in adulthood. I would like you to know and understand that these studies were conducted, and when you look at ACE in terms of childhood trauma, this is the instance that in the trauma that happens and occurs before the age of 18. Anything from 18 above is then considered adulthood. So I'm going to first give you a little background about ACE. The ACE study was actually conducted from 1995 to 1997. 17,000 people were surveyed. And in 1998, the information was published. Now, what we're going to look at and we're going to talk about in terms of the 3 realms of ACE. And we actually have a diagram on the board. Also, Master Teacher will actually provide you all with the website where you can actually pull that information up in. So with the 3 realms in which they discussed ACE and they actually surveyed information in terms of trauma and how trauma affects children. We have 3 areas, which is the household, the community, and the environment. Now, when you look at the diagram and you look at the drawing that we have here and the one that Master Teacher will give you the information for, with the household, there are various things within the household. The household is actually represented by the tree. Within the household, we have the following topics: divorce, homelessness, incarcerated family members, physical and emotional neglect, domestic violence, maternal depression, alcoholism, parental mental illness, emotional and sexual abuse. Now that's within the household. Within the community, we have historical trauma. And we know when we look at historical trauma, we're talking about intergenerational trauma. It's not just what you're currently experiencing, but what has been transferred and passed down from generations. We also have substandard schools. We have structural racism, poor water and air quality. When we look at the big cities, we know a lot of time what's happened with our big cities is that they've taken and they've ran interstates throughout the areas where the poor people live, and especially the poor black people. We have lack of jobs, poor housing quality, and affordability. Now, the last thing in 3 is environment. And with environment, they talk about natural disasters, climate crisis, which we already know we're having an issue with our climate here. It has record heat and droughts. Think about the number of hurricanes that we have experienced, tornadoes that we have experienced, earthquakes that are being experienced. Those type of things are part of the 3 realms of ACE. Okay? Now, the next thing I want to discuss is the scale. And Master Teacher is actually going to give you the information for the scale as well. Now, when we look at the scale, the first thing that we want to note is that with the scale, there's only 10 questions that are asked. Those questions that are asked are closed-ended questions, which means they're either yes or no. They're not questions where you're able to elaborate. What they're doing is they're getting a gauge for what's going on with you and what you may be experiencing. So the questions are designed as this. Number 1, it says, did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you? So that's simple, a yes or no. So if you scored no for that question, that's okay, because with this test and with this scoring, what happens is that anything from the 10 questions that you score, if you score 4 and above, then it's a need for concern. It's what happens there. So question 2 talks about if there was a parent or other older adult that often pushed you, grabbed you, or threw something at you. So if you look at that, and those of us who are in the field, the social field, even in the medical field, and not only that, just knowing people in general, we've grown up in homes where you may have had something thrown at you. You may have had a grandparent throw a shoe at you. Now, we didn't consider that trauma. We considered we did something we had no business doing, and they throw a shoe at us. But this is something that actually they're saying that if it's done often, then indeed it's something to be concerned about. But at the same time, it also has to look at, and we have to consider the modes of discipline, how we're disciplined, and our methods of discipline, because none of us were disciplined the same way. So if you have a parent whose parent throws shoes at them, then they're more likely to throw shoes at their child. Number 3 says, did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you touch or fondle you? Or have they ever touched your body in a sexual way? Okay. Then number 4 talks about how often did you feel like you weren't loved by a family member, or you didn't feel as though you were important. Now, with growing up, and we understand human growth and development, a lot of times we can feel that way. And what is the issue of concern, or indeed it's a part of our growing process? Especially, a lot of times I reflect back to the years of, say, from 11 to 13, when you're trying to actually develop some type of autonomy in yourself, and you maybe feel that your one's listening to you, or things are not going well with you, then you're not loved. So then from there, we also looked at, have your parents ever separated or divorced? So that's considered something to be concerned about as well. 7 talks about, was your mother or stepmother often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or something thrown at her? Now, of course, like I said, the scale initially was developed in from 95 to 97, they did the research, and then it was published in 98. We know times have changed, and times are constantly progressing. Nowadays, to ask the question that, if your mother or stepmother had anything thrown at her, you may have come out of a house where your parents are not married. Your parents could have a boyfriend. It could be a same-sex home. So a lot of times, questions are going to have to be tailored based upon your population of people that you're dealing with. Next, it says, did you live with anyone who had a problem with drinking, alcohol, or street drugs? So was that a part of your household? I can reflect back when I started getting a degree, my undergraduate degree. One of my first classes, the question was asked, social work classes, it was asked, how much are you involved with drinking? Do you have family members that drink? How often do they drink? Some of us, that's normal way of life. Which means I didn't realize that my family was considered dysfunctional, because it's normal. It's a normality for us. So I have to look at those type of things, and we have to consider those type of things, what's considered normal to us and not normal to others. The next talks about, was there a household member depressed or mentally ill? Did a household member attempt suicide? Now, when you're dealing with young people, how many would really know if the person is mentally ill or not? A lot of times, mental illness has gone undiagnosed. In the Black community, we're really just starting to make an effort to, and we're just starting to make an effort to actually seek services from mental health and actually consider mental health services because of the things that have happened with us in the past and do still currently happen with us. The last question asks, did you have a household member to go to prison? And indeed, if that was an issue in the home. So from the scale, anything that's considered 4 or above is a concern, and actually there should be further investigation into the process. Also, one thing they spoke about and one thing that's being done is that they've asked that when someone is actually administered the scale, then that is done through your medical doctor. And the push has been for it to be done through the pediatricians because there's already a patient and doctor relationship that is involved, and it's there and it's in place. So from that, what can happen is that that's just another test that's being administered during the time that their screening is going on already. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the ABCs of a trauma-informed agenda. With this, I am going to discuss, based upon what it said with ACE, I'm going to give you some statistics as what it looks like to, and who was the population that actually responded to the surveys that were given. Once again, this all comes from the 17,000 people who answered the following questions. So here, 80% of the population, which included white and Hispanic, answered the questions. We had 10% black. I would suggest that we're pretty low because a lot of times we don't seek medical care. A lot of times we're hesitant to give people further information because of the fear that someone's going to come into the home and take our children from us, or we're going to get some type of label that's going to make it hard for us to actually move on to something else. So 10% were black, 10% were Asian, about 50% were men, and 50% were women. 74% had attended college. So when we look at the study, what we can notice and recognize is that these were not people that were not educated. A lot of the information came from those people who were educated, who had some knowledge about what was going on. 62% were age 50 or older. So now what we're looking at is that you're talking to people and you have people that are actually discussing the traumas that they have experienced back in childhood. Now, here's what the study found. Of the 17,000 respondents, 1 in 4 were exposed to 2 categories of ACE. 1 in 16 were exposed to 4 categories of ACE. 22% of them were sexually abused as children. 66% of them were women who had experienced abuse, violence of family, or family strife in childhood. And women were 50% more likely than men to have experienced 5 or more ACE. Once again, if we think about that, we think about our society.
Please reverse ACE with us again so that we'll know.
Once again, ACE is the adverse childhood experiences.
Okay.
And it refers to the event that happened that you experienced in childhood. Anytime before the age of 18.
Okay.
Because 18 and above, you're considered adult.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So why is this important for you to give that to us today?
It's
Why are you
important.
giving that to us?
It is important for us to understand that a lot of things that we are experiencing now as adults are a result of what we've had experienced in childhood. And because we experienced them in childhood, they weren't addressed at childhood. So what happens is that we've actually grown up with the trauma. Okay?
Now, so this particular kind of trauma that you're relating to is
Yes.
that we normalize it in our homes, correct?
That's correct.
Can you kind of expound on that, please? How we normalize certain behaviors. For example, you was talking about throwing a shoe.
Right. We normalize it in our home because, once again, I always say hurt people hurt people. I can only give to you what I've been given. So as I said before, if my mom's mother threw shoes at her when she was angry with her, then in turn, if I haven't been taught to do something different myself, I'm going to throw shoes at you. So that becomes the normality of it. Then as well, if you think about the black community in particular, we're traumatized and re-traumatized daily. And actually what has happened, traumatization has become a part of our lives. It's just as simple and it's just as normal to us as breathing. So a lot of times you don't know you've been traumatized. You think it's normal. You think it's normal. Okay? Okay. So now, what else the study found is that this is over a lifetime, back to exactly what Apostle was just talking about, the impact of trauma over a lifetime. There are neurological, biological, and psychological and social in nature, which means it encompasses your whole being. Everything about you displays the trauma that you've experienced. There's changes in your brain neurology, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, adoption of health risk behaviors as coping mechanisms. And those coping mechanisms they listed are things like eating disorder. So you have what? You have people who overeat, obesity. You have people who undereat. You have people who are bulimic. And you have people who are anorexic. So you could be binging and purging. You know, you eat your food, you throw your food up. It's a coping mechanism. You have people who abuse substances. So we understand that. Think about it. Especially when it comes to, the Black community and substance abuses. We all know that a lot of our people have taken we solve our problems by drinking or taking some type of drug. This will help them. Self-harm, sexual promiscuity, and violence. There's also severe and persistent behavioral health and social problems that lead to early death. So what's happened because of the trauma has not been dealt with, then people are actually dying as a result of it. Now,
let's feel some comments out here. Let's feel
Okay.
some of those. Okay.
We've got Rhonda Moore who just mentioned about the
food conference there.
Yeah.
And correct. A food conference, a lot of people, it's easy to access, and basically the food doesn't give you any challenge. You eat the food, and the food it becomes basically your companion. It's what happens. It's what happens with the food. Which actually what happens is, if you look at the process of that and the progress of that with the food, is that the continuance of eating of the food, from there you're going to develop some type of health problem. Which indeed, because of the obesity or what you're eating, which could trigger maybe high blood pressure, diabetes, it could lead to early death. Okay? I don't see any other questions.
That's it. No problem.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the multiple trauma experience and the risk for. So with the trauma and the experience of trauma, you have anxiety problems. You know, you avoid people, places, and things that are familiar and similar to the trauma events. So here's the thing I think about. Say if you were someone that when you were punished, they may have locked you in a closet. So because you were locked in the closet, you may have an issue of if you were locked in the closet, you may have an issue of not wanting to be in very enclosed places, cramped spaces. Elevators may not be comfortable for you because it could trigger, I'm being locked up in something again. So that's another thing. You have physical health problems. You have sleep problems. Why? A lot of times what's happening, when the body starts to relax, then actually think about it, your conscious is always awake. So when you're in that hypervigilant state, you're not thinking about those issues that have occurred with the trauma. But you lay down to rest and you start to maybe dream about it. Or you start to have flashbacks about it. So those are type things in terms of your sleep problems. So then what happens? You're having insomnia. You're not sleeping well. You have emotional problems such as feeling numb and or disconnected from oneself or environment. It's what people would like to refer to as you walk around like a zombie. Because you're basically, you're not trying to feel anything because you may relate that feeling to that trauma. So you have memory problems and you have flashbacks. Now, with the memory problems, here's the thing we think about with that. What if what you're remembering is actually the incident, or it's a made up, it's what's called false memories. But you have to give the account that with false memories, that could come from trauma as well. So, Sister Rhonda said, my mind rarely shuts down, which is true. You're always going, and nurse practitioner is going to talk about that fight or flight issue, which means you're always in that stance of, oh, something's about to happen, I need to be on my guard. So also with the multiple trauma, once again, it talks about alcohol abuse, substance abuse, obesity, respiratory difficulties. If we think about it, I would like to maybe take in consideration the number of children who have asthma. And indeed, is that asthma related to the environment in terms of maybe, they talk about dust or, maybe insects, or is it that there's something that goes on in the home that triggers the asthma? It's what's happening with the asthma. Heart disease, multiple sex partners, poor relationship with others, smoking, suicide attempts, and unattended pregnancies are all a part of trauma. Why is that? Because in childhood, you depend on your parents to make you feel safe. You depend on your parents for your survivability. In other words, your parents are God. They're your God. That's when Dr. Lipton talked about from 0 to 6. If you take that time, whatever you teach your child during that time, you can determine what that child is going to be as an adult. So with that, if your relationship with your parents have not been well, and then you've not had anything to come in to actually assist with learning proper ways to have relationships, then relationship will always become a problem. When you think about what happens when we have people who always say that it's someone else's fault. So once again, it becomes internal and looking at yourselves and what's going on with yourselves. Along with that, now here's when we talk about in adulthood, trauma that's being experienced in adulthood. So we have people who have been in combat. They have related trauma. So we have a lot of people that's from the military. I can think back as far as my father, who served 2 tours of Vietnam, what his trauma experience was like. He was constantly having flashbacks. He was constantly having to talk underneath the bed because he thought that there was ammunition being fired at him. Is the trauma. But then not only that, if we take and really consider the Vietnam War, what were the soldiers treated like when they came back to the country? How did this country treat them?
Correct.
And then being a black man and a woman in the service, you came back to still a society that's racist. There's still oppression going on, and you've been somewhere in war as well, so you come back with your wounds from war and then be re-traumatized with the society that you live in. Now, we talked about refugee and torture and civil unrest, witnessing or experiencing violence. So it's not even what you participate in, it's what you saw happen. Catastrophic loss, which are natural disasters. And with that, the first thing comes to mind to me is Katrina. Katrina was awful. And really, to me, that was a natural disaster. And with that natural disaster, we had so many people that were displaced. And, of course, we've seen where they were going to rescuing animals and leaving people on top of homes. And the number of bodies that were floating along that we've seen on TV. Now, here's what they have for the findings. 1 in 6 men have experienced emotional trauma. 80% of people in psychiatric hospitals have experienced physical or sexual abuse. 66% of the people are in substance abuse treatment reported child abuse or neglect. 90% of the women with alcoholism were sexually abused or suffered severe violence from parents. Now, what else they found is that 67% of them all attempted suicide. 64% of adults attempted suicide. And 80% of child and adolescents attempted suicide. Okay? So once again, what we have, the way that they're dealing with the trauma is to actually just terminate their lives. Now, it says, what does the prevalence data tell us? A growing body of research of relationships between victimization and later offending. Many people with trauma histories have overlapping problems, which means you have a mental health problem. You also have a problem with addictions. You have a physical problem. You may have high blood pressure. You may have diabetes. And then that same person could be a victim or they could be a perpetrator of a crime. So, but all of this, we have to still remember, started in childhood. It's the experiences you had in childhood. And it says victims of trauma are found across all systems of care, which simply means they're everywhere. And then we have to go back and we have to consider the people that we have incarcerated. How many of those people have been victims of crimes? Of trauma themselves. And it was the trauma that they experienced that got them to the place that they are now. But is that really considered? And is that looked at? So at this time, we're going to have a nurse practitioner to begin.
So what I really want to talk about is what I'm really passionate about. Basically that trauma and chronic stress causes illness, which is totally different from what I was taught in school when I became a nurse practitioner. We were taught about more of the body as a mechanism, the mind and body being separate, and not the fact that there is such a connection between the mind and the body. Basically, you cannot disconnect them. So you are taught dualism, which is making something that is actually one into two. And to me, this information is mind-blowing, because I know a lot of us sit and wonder, why are we sick? Why is mama sick? Why is daddy sick? And we're told, well, we're black, so we have hypertension. We're black, we have heart disease. It's our genetics. And this information is so powerful, because that's not what it is. So let me start first of all by taking a drink here. Sister KD gives us these wonderful drinks, and let me enjoy this here. Take a minute to relax so we can start talking about this. Thank you, KD. Okay. So, an example of this is, a lot of the information I'm going to give you today is from a doctor called Gabor Mate. He wrote this book called When the Body Says No, that talks about how eventually all this trauma and chronic stress causes the body to say stop. It is disease as an end point to things that have occurred throughout your whole life, and that's what the ACEs study is talking about. When he talked about the fact that there's a 6-fold increase in prostate cancer deaths in blacks compared with whites, he said, you cannot explain this by genetic difference. Because if you look at Nigerian black males, which would be similar to us in genetics, they don't have the 6-fold increase. So what he said is the historical, social, and economic position of black people in the U.S. society has undermined cohesion in black communities and black families, and has imposed greater psychological stress on African Americans than their fellow Caucasian citizens or blacks in Africa. So what is the reason? We're similar genetically to West Africans, but we have a 6-fold increase in prostate cancer deaths. So would it not be probably our environment that is making a difference? So the initial way that I was taught was the medical model of disease. And the medical model gives you this narrow kind of causation. It's either, genes, it's something external. It's very focused on disease. It's focused on fixing disease, like you fix a car. Not about where did it come from? Why this illness? Why this person? Why now? Instead, it's just, hey, here's this disease. And we've done a lot of research and cut up a lot of bodies, and we figure out how to put them back together. We know how to fix it. We've done this research on drugs, and we know these drugs that can do certain things in the body to fix it. But there's not too much thought about etiology that doesn't have to do with physiology. Not too much thought about the mind, environment, and how that affects an endpoint of disease. So the new model is the biopsychosocial model. And that model basically says disease is the endpoint of a process. So it is what has built up over time, and now we have disease, and we need to look at what caused the disease, and not just physiologically. Because, as I said before, the mind and body cannot be separated. So, talking about trauma and talking about what Cassandra talked about, depending upon what you experience in your childhood, what type of traumas you experience, that will have an effect on what kind of personality traits that you exhibit throughout your adulthood. And these different personality traits we found, they are linked to certain disease processes. And so in the research, they've talked about type A, type B, and type either C or D personalities. And each of these personality types we're very familiar with. So we have these three personality types. We probably have all heard about type A personalities, the driven type of personality that's very rigid. But this type A could stand also for anger, outbursts, because type A personalities tend to have as a big part rage. So they express anger through rage. And so a lot of what these personality types are about are how do you process your emotions. Now the type B personality, your type B personality is your balanced personality. One who has emotional competence, one who processes emotions appropriately and dispenses with them and doesn't carry them over time. Your type CD, the reason why they call it C or D is because cancer and chronic disease show up in your type CD. Your type CD personality, you're looking at one, okay? So we're repressors. We're not the person who's going to cuss you out. We're the person who's we're gonna hold it in, and we're gonna keep it in. We're gonna ball it into our bodies, and that is going to just it becomes a poison inside of your body. And anybody out there who knows my personal story knows how that affected me. So I'm type CD. So you type CD people. They dissociate from their emotions, deny their emotions. And this type of personality, so like I said, the significance of this is that illnesses are related to these personality types. And
So with CD, what you're saying, a lot of that has to do with women. Women tend to be more of the CD personality.
Women are typically more likely to be CD because CD personalities are the people who are going to put others before themselves, don't have boundaries between others and themselves, don't make healthy boundaries. They're usually considered good people. People think, that's such a good person. Not realizing that person is killing themselves to be good to you.
Yes.
So with our type A people, the main thing you see with them is cardiovascular disease. So those are the people that are going to have your high blood pressure, your heart attacks more often. It's considered associated with high bursts of cortisol and adrenaline that do more damage to the arteries than the way that a type CD over time, with a chronic low release of these stress hormones over time, ends up with more chronic disease states. And the chronic disease states I'm talking about are autoimmune illness, cancer. So we're talking about rheumatoid arthritis.
Another autoimmune disease is what? Lupus.
Lupus is another one. We hear in the African American community all the time. Lupus is a big one. Sarcoidosis. That's what Bernie Mac died of. He died of sarcoidosis. That is a autoimmune disease, and basically an autoimmune disease is when your body does not know itself, so it fights itself. So think about if you don't have boundaries, if you don't know self from non-self. So your body doesn't know. The same confusion you have psychologically, your body exhibits. So this is the end point of not being able to have boundaries, is your body doesn't have boundaries, and it fights itself. So also cancer. What is cancer doing? Cancer is not being able to, it basically is due to, in a lot of times, the immune system not functioning correctly. So levels of cortisol that are abnormal, levels of adrenaline that are abnormal will suppress the immune system and cause the immune system not to work correctly. Now, in your immune system, you have cells called natural killer cells. Your natural killer cells are right now killing cancer cells in your body. So if you are suppressing them, we wonder, why does grandmama, who took care of her 10 kids and her 15 grandkids and her 3 husbands who died, turn up with cancer, chronic stress, suppressed immune system, natural killer cells that are not doing what they should normally be doing if she wasn't under all that stress. So these personality types are important, and it's important for us to know how to gain more of a B personality type, which is someone we don't meet them that often, because actually Dr. Mate said it's almost impossible for a person to get to adulthood and have emotional competence, which is a type B personality. So these type B personalities are rare. It's something sometimes that you have to work at. You need therapy for. You have to figure out how to get yourself balanced in between these two.
Right. Can you just kind of just elaborate on the fact that these are not just labels, that this is actual information that can bring healing to you? Because,
Oh, yes.
like as we stated, oftentimes what happens in our community, as Dr. Lindsay talked about, what happens in our community is that it's a taboo
Yes.
for us to talk to a therapist or a psychologist or someone that has that professional labeling.
Yes.
So can you really kind of just get us to really focus and understand that this is just not some labeling, that we're just not in here trying to be erudite, but this is something that's really serious.
If we want to improve our health, we have got to become emotionally competent. And a lot of times we do not have examples of emotional competence that we can go to and be able to show ourselves how to do this. So we need help. We need therapy. We need each other. Let me become emotionally competent and show you how to do it.
That's correct.
You know, so and I wanted to give the definition of emotional competency so that it's a little bit more clear what it looks like to process your emotions correctly. And if you, Master Teacher, if you could put that on the timeline for me, emotional competence, and if everybody is able to look at it. Let's see.
And why Master Teacher's putting it on the timeline, Pastor just made reference to us actually seeking out that therapy and the aversions that we have to that therapy. It's the aversions we have to therapy is because of the way that we have been handled as Africans. We're very distrustful, and rightfully so.
Yes.
Because if we look at things, we have been experimented on. Not just in the past, but in the present as well. As we now speak, we've been experimented on. Not only that, they're very quick to give us a label. So indeed, I may be experiencing some things from trauma, but you don't want to address my trauma. You want to give me a label. So we can actually look at it as like this from this point. Statistics shows us that black boys are naturally more aggressive and they have more energy than their counterparts. So, but my child gets a label as he's ADD. He's ADD. But that's not what he is. He's got energy that needs to be expressed in the proper arena of things, is what happens. So how likely am I to come to you as my doctor who is of another persuasion and tell you that I'm having X, Y, and Z issues going on with Johnny without you saying, oh, well, here's the DSM-5. You have an ADHD label. Take this medication, Concerta. Extended, which means it's going to be released over a period of time. It's just not going to be take the pill this morning. You're going to take it this morning. It's going to last you till tomorrow.
Take the speed.
Take the speed. That's exactly right,
Take
because
the
it's speed
speed
is what it is.
Yes.
To think about those type of things. So we indeed, and then at the same time, because we as black individuals, we have, a lot of our life has been dependent upon the church and what the church can offer. So we're those people within those organizations that are competent enough to actually start to have some sessions with people and them to not give them a European label.
Right.
To really look at you, who you are as an individual, not based upon a classic textbook definition, but who am I as an individual? What is it and how do I function as an individual? So indeed,
And not to give you a religious label.
Yes. Yes.
Not to decide, you know,
Absolutely.
you got a spirit in you.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, the devil.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
So in the comfort level, you know, we feel more comfortable because we have been abused, as Cassandra said, in the medical system. We feel more comfortable seeking this help from those of us who understand that. And so if we can encourage, you know, anyone who is interested in at any point in your life, you could be 60, 70 years old right now. But you have the experience to start researching this subject and be able to be there for each other, even if it's not in a professional way. But let me go ahead, if everybody is seeing the definition of emotional competence. So basically, it is the capacity to feel our emotions so we are actually aware of them when we are experiencing stress. The ability to express our emotions effectively and thereby to assert our needs and maintain the integrity of our emotional boundaries. So you know who you are and what your responsibility is. And so you know self from non-self. And your body doesn't get confused and end up having illness because of that. The facility to distinguish between psychological reactions that are pertinent to the present situation and those that represent actual residue from the past. Because a lot of times we will find ourselves reacting and causing ourselves to have stress and have anxiety in a new situation that is reminiscent of a previous situation, and it is the previous situation that is actually causing our stress. We don't really care that much about that present situation, but we're convincing ourselves that we do. But if you are aware, then you know what is actually going on there. So, also.
So the key, let me ask a question
Yeah.
before you go on to the next one. So then the key in that would be to be aware.
To be aware.
So to be aware is to be alive. So,
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Okay, so in so far as once a person becomes aware,
Yes.
do they recognize the boundaries of that, or what are they going to go into once they recognize that they're working from the residuals of a past relationship or ruminating from a past relationship or what have you? And again, can you relate that to our audience, because so that they know that you are getting information that will actually cost you thousands and thousands of dollars?
Yes.
You know, so can you kind of relate that, put that in kind
Yes.
of, like,
This is so awareness, as Apostle was speaking about awareness. So you become aware. Okay. Say you've listened to this. You go into a situation tomorrow at work or whatever day you go to work, and you feel yourself tighten up, and you think about, oh, the truth session. This is similar to when this traumatic thing happened to me. Now, even though you become aware of that, and awareness is a first step, how do you deal with that? And that's what we need help deciphering. That's why we need to talk. That's why we need therapy, different modalities of therapy, so that once we are aware, we can know what to do.
We talked about this because we said the same thing. We talked about, we said, you know, it's what Apostle always says, to be aware is to be alive, and to understand when that phrase is made, it's just not the issue of external. It's also internal. And when she talked about being aware of that, you also have to understand, what is the script that you're playing in your head? What are you constantly ruminating in your head? It's the conversation that you're having with yourself. It's your self-talk. So just like Keisha just talked about, you get in a particular situation, you feel yourself starting to tense up. You feel that flight and fight modality coming upon yourself. What are you really saying to yourself about that? Because what we understand is this: the brain does not distinguish between an incident that happened today or an incident that happened yesterday. It sees it all as the same thing. So you have to change your thought processes. You have to purposely do it. You don't get up today and do it today and not do it tomorrow. It's what you are consciously aware of, and that you consciously make that effort to do it every day. You change that script.
which means that you have to actually really establish some type of boundaries.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, we're going to run into some problems then with the conscious community.
Okay.
Because the conscious community don't want boundaries. They want you to take all of the boundaries off. And
No.
you just kind of like be so spacious
Right.
that you have free thought.
Okay.
So can y'all address that? I'm saying something here, and I
Yeah.
think you all know what I'm saying.
Here's my perspective of that when we talk about endlessness, no boundaries. Why is it that we have laws? And I'm not just talking about laws that are made by the government. Everything has a law, and there's something that there is a need. There is a law that's being followed. Let's take nature for example. The ocean does not go past its boundaries.
No, it isn't.
It goes out, and those waves come in. The waves don't go out and then come back in. 9 feet inland. There's a boundary there.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that we're going to be boundaryless? Where are we going to operate like that? Who is going to accept us being boundaryless? Okay, we just going to do what we want to. Are we really that much of a free moral agent? Okay, so what happens when you take that and you exercise that, and in return you're incarcerated?
Correct.
Where are you going to use that at then? How is that going to work for you? I mean, that's realistic. We have to really be cognizant of being in reality. That's what we talk about.
Yes.
Reality. What's the reality of things?
Yeah, what's the reality of things? And as far as not having boundaries and the conscious community, you have to understand too that it is a response to something. So if you tie somebody up, they think that the only solution to that is for you to be totally free. So you have a pendulum. You have a pendulum. And where you need to be is in the middle.
Balance.
Balance is where you need to be. And so there's a lot of kids that are going too far to the other side, and there's consequences. Because without balance, health is balance.
That's right.
So without balance, there's going to be illness. You know, so as you said, you know, if you do something like that, you're gonna be incarcerated. Nature has its boundaries.
That's right.
You know,
Yeah.
and so we need to be natural, and to be natural is to also have boundaries.
Right. Okay, Brother Michael Neal, is there something you can say?
Yes. If I may add,
Yes.
there's a boundary there, Bering Sea in the Pacific Ocean,
Yes.
where both the sea and the ocean come together.
Yes.
And because of the different densities of
Yeah.
the water, they never cross.
That's
You
right.
see
Right.
salt and
They go
fresh
back
water.
out.
Salt and fresh water.
That's
You see
right.
There's a fine line. And
Yes.
they never cross.
Yes.
They come together, but they never
That's it.
intermingle.
Right.
And here again, and we talked about this earlier too, because I talked about Dr. Cress Wellison, who I love. Peace be upon her. We talked about this, and we talked about when we look at this whole thing about no boundaries. Once again, is that not fragmented? If we indeed are holistic people, we understand the oneness of things, and that we actually have exchange with the oneness of things. Everything is what you did your circle. One thing is dependent upon another thing. We can't do that. It's not real. It's not real. That's not real.
In relations to the question that was put forth, or a statement that Dr. Lindsay made, Brother Michael Neal says parents are the reality of God's to children.
Yes.
I see Brother George Slaughter sends a love sign. Brother Ibrahim agrees with Brother Michael Neal in terms of the parents being the gods to the children. And Sister Tammy says mental wounds are just as severe as physical wounds.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Let me see.
Let's see.
Okay. Sister Rhonda says, I am a living witness. You have to find the right fit in the therapist. Some of them know not what they are doing.
That's right.
Okay.
You see Elder Gibbs' comment.
Okay. I'm just going down the line.
Okay.
Right. Khalil, again, is Ibrahim. Emotions, competence, great words from the amazing Keisha. Okay. Hey, Bortis. What's up, Tyrone Green? Hey, Miss King. Since Tammy says again, truly, labels need to be banned. They are killing, destroying us. We need to change the foods we are eating. Bad foods are the culprit in regards to what you all were saying. Okay, now let me find Elder Gibbs. Are you looking at it?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, go ahead and read it.
She said, can diabetes be a byproduct of trauma? Yes,
Yes.
absolutely so.
Yeah. They're going to be directly related, or there's going to be a correlation.
Okay. When your body is in that fight or flight mode, one of the things it does is release more glucose into your bloodstream.
Okay.
And so if you are constantly in that fight or flight mode, you are going to be releasing glucose into your bloodstream. You are going to be producing insulin. You're going to get to the point where your pancreas is tired of producing insulin to deal with that extra glucose in your bloodstream. So yes, there is a direct correlation.
Okay. You were gonna where were you going next?
Just we were talking about what do we need to do, and getting help, and what does it look like to be aware, and if Master Teacher could put up for me on the timeline the 7 A's of healing, and I just want to just briefly touch on these. These are some of the things that you can talk to someone about. For one thing, talk to yourself about.
Yes.
And you can easily look these up. Just type in the 7 A's of healing. Also, Dr. Mate, M-A-T-E. They are acceptance. So we're talking about acceptance, awareness, processing of anger, autonomy, knowing who you are, having healthy attachment, so knowing who you are and attaching to others in a healthy manner, being able to assert your sense of being, and also affirmation. So those are just 7 things that he has pointed out that we can work through, and there are videos that you can find about these 7 A's. So, because we always want to be in the direction of healing, because we can point out that we know we have trauma. Mm-hmm. So let's also help to heal each other.
Good. Let's see. Was there any? It was. Sister Rhonda made a statement too. I was trying to get to. I can't.
Okay. I see.
Sister Rhonda says mental pain is far worse than physical pain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The mental pain stays with you long after the trauma was administered. The
Yes.
physical pain goes away with time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is exactly what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly what we're talking about, Sister Rhonda.
It's that self-talk. It's happened, and being able to separate from that, and then understand that it it's like anything else. It's in your quiet time, in your quiet moments, everything tends to flood back at you in terms of what you've experienced, and you start to rehash those things, which means you open those wounds back up again. So
Okay.
it becomes the script. It becomes the self-talk that you're having.
Okay. Okay. Can you, for a nurse practitioner, can you elaborate, please, on the fight and flight as it relates?
So basically, fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, is something that is a healthy response. So if you're walking down the street and there's a Rottweiler coming towards you, with its teeth baring, your body is going to say, okay, we need to get ready for a threat. So we need to increase our blood pressure. We need to increase our heart rate. We need to take the blood and send it to the legs and arms so that we can run away. We need to increase the glucose so that we have fuel to run away. So this is a thing that your body should do when there is actually a real threat. But the problem is that nowadays, when's the last time? Now, some people do actually experience real threats. But for the most part, on a daily basis, a lot of us do not experience those actual physical threats that need that physiological response. And so we are actually causing our bodies to have that physiological response when we are upset with a spouse, upset at work, experiencing any of the 10 traumas that they talked about in the ACE study. Mm-hmm. So we're having a response that should be something that happens rarely and has a purpose. And we're experiencing it on a sometimes daily basis, weekly basis, and doing that is causing damage to our bodies.
Okay, so with that threat of that Rottweiler, in a normal setting, in a normal interaction with that you're either gonna pick up a stick and hit him, or you're gonna flight.
You're gonna run.
Right. You're whatever the situation is, your physiological response is going to prepare you for that. Right.
Right.
Okay. So now, but what is happening is the persons or individual, they're staying in that flight or fight in a prolonged period of time, right?
Yes.
Which means that there's something going on with the amygdala that's talking to the pituitary
Right.
that's talking to the adrenaline. The adrenaline is sending back information and it's keeping them in that hyper state, right? So when that happens, what is going on with a person so that they can understand that this is really happening to them?
Well, some people might just say, well, I'm anxious, or I'm mad. I'm this is what I'm feeling. So you feel these things inside your body, and a lot of times when you feel them inside of your body, for me, for instance, like I would think, oh, I'm anxious, and to be aware of the fact that whatever it is I'm anxious about shouldn't be causing this physiological change in me, and I need to be able to figure out how to address it.
Yes.
So you're feeling rage, you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling sometimes it goes the other way and it's depression. You need to look at it a different way. Your
don't
body,
want to get out of the bed,
right?
Don't want to eat,
Yes.
sluggish,
Right.
Crying.
Yes, crying, always having a problem with everything.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so your body is telling you that something is going wrong in your mind, and that's where you need to address it.
And so you can point our audience to those
7 A's of healing.
the seven.
The 7 A's, yes.
7 A's.
They're on the timeline.
Can you repeat them for us again, please?
They are acceptance,
Okay.
awareness, anger, autonomy, attachment, assertion, and affirmation.
I know we're getting winding up, but with those, can you just briefly just go down the line, touch on them,
Touch
just
on-
kind of give just real quick synopsis or something?
So,
for us, please?
acceptance is basically accepting what is. Accepting what is. Don't try to go into fantasy.
There you go.
Accept reality. Awareness. Being aware of those processes that are going on inside of you and why they are going on. And that's what we talked about. One of the big things with that is, are you denying something? So, we have to be willing to face the truth. We have to accept it. We have to be aware of it. When we have anger, which anger is a normal response, we need to know how to process it without being rageful and without trying to act like we don't have it. So we have to learn how to be competent in dealing with our emotions. Autonomy. We talked about women knowing their boundaries.
Yes.
There's men also that don't have their boundaries. Attachment. Seeking healthy attachments with others in your family, in the community, building communities. That is healing. That is us healing each other. Healthy attachments. Assertion, again, is just a declaration that we are what we are, who we are, and we don't apologize for it. So, and a lot of that has to do with identity, with us, has to do with identity. And affirmation, affirming who we are. So, and that's just a quick overview. And if anybody wants any more of that information, they can contact me. But
Via inbox, DM you, right? Okay. Can you quickly, those ACE, can you run across those ACEs again for us, please?
The definition of ACEs and what it was, was the childhood experiences,
Okay.
is what they were. And what they did is the study that they did was with 17,000 people.
Okay.
And it addressed, it asked for those things in terms of, were you being sweared at home? Have you been hit by anyone at home? Did you have a parent that was mentally ill? did you experience your parent being beat by someone, which came off of the scale is where
Right.
it came from. Did you have you experienced divorce, a separation? Has there been a household member that
Right.
been in prison?
Yes.
And to understand that everything came from those three realms,
Yes.
which was the household, the community, and the environment is what it
Yes.
came from. And then to understand with the community, which covers many things, and to think that you actually is not going to have, most people are actually in all three realms of this is what's
Okay.
happening, because you look at it, a great deal of our life has been in substandard housing,
Yes. This is correct.
substandard wages, not enough money. You got Medicaid, but Medicaid doesn't take care of everything in terms of having the best medical treatment. And then also, if Master Harris would put the article, I put an article out there for further reading, which talks about America's black babies are paying for society's ills. What will we do to fix it? It's on the very back page, and it's the very last, my second page of my notes. And this article was actually done in 2018, and it addressed the mortality rate of black children. And not only did it address the mortality rate of black children, but it also addressed college-educated, well-paying black people who still were having their babies die, and how we are mishandled in the medical field. But at the same time, Serena had the baby and almost died.
Yes.
Nobody paid her any attention.
Right.
Now, so that's trauma.
Yes.
One of the biggest things I want everybody to take away from this is something that was in the book. Basically, that people do not become ill despite their lives, but rather because of their lives.
Yes.
And if the scientific community would catch up with that, much of disease could be prevented and healed if we would catch up with the mind-body unity, and learning that our psychological and is not separate from the rest of our systems. Then healing modalities would change. It wouldn't always be a pill. A lot of times it would be something psychological.
Okay. So, again, as you guys are giving your summation, then, of course, it really doesn't have anything to do because some people are here by placebos.
That's correct.
Correct, and that's that effect. That is that effect.
Which makes that what? Mental.
Yes.
Yes.
What they always say, it's all in your mind.
Yes. Yes.
And a lot
So,
of times it is.
so again, what we've lost is then our God consciousness,
Yes.
Yes.
the ability to have self-control,
Yes.
to have control over our own faculties and over our own physiology. It's all right, guys. Y'all can
Yes.
wrap it up. You can get your summations. Anything else you may want to say? And close out.
I'd like to say thank you for the time that you've shared with us today and listen to what we have to say, because it is very serious, and we as a community have to really look at things, because once again we have to go within as opposed to without to indeed connect with those people who can indeed give you that help that you're looking for. They don't have to have a particular letter behind their name or in front of their names. There are many things, and we look at it, we came from a society where the elders were our leaders, and they guide us in the direction. And I say elders, I mean male and female, that they guided us where we needed to go. We didn't go to a doctor for that. So indeed, reach out to those that you know, and you, without a shadow of a doubt, that they're confident. And they're competent enough to help you with that journey that you have, because as Rhonda said, she has not found that fit yet for a therapist.
And I just thank you for being here. I hope this information helped you as much as it helped me, because I'm telling you, it taught me so much about myself. So I was so happy to be able to share it with you. I just want to wish everybody peace and love, and thank you for being here.
Once again, thank you, audience.
To be
Hey, fam. Yes, indeed. Yeah, you've been in another truth session. Hanging out. Y'all know I'm your host with the most one. The apostle, the prophet. Yes. Yes. To my right, none other than practitioner, the nurse, Chakisha. Yeah. To my left, none other than Dr. Lindsay. Listen, y'all have been in this session. I'm excited. As you all can see, this information is really going forth. As always, do what? Hold what you got. Yeah, muse over it. Cogitate upon it. But by all means, cover yourselves accordingly. One love, eternal light, peace, power, and prosperity. Shalom alaikum, Bishbekar. Yeah.